Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Chandler as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Heartland Running Podcast. I'm Chandler.
I'm Andy.
I'm Crystal.
And today we have the amazing Chris Miller with us, who on December 13th, 2017, completed his run across the United States of America to raise awareness for drug and alcohol abuse and rehabilitation. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out episode 24 of the Heartland Running Podcast, where we talk to him before he begins his epic quest across the continent and cover his reasons for doing this, the logistics of the run, and of course, we have to talk about nutrition.
And we're excited to have you back, Chris, so welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
The first thing I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, but how has the transition from running across the United States to coming back to a regular day-to-day existence been for you? Has it been kind of a shock?
Yeah, it's been a total shock. Actually, my first week after the run, when I got back to my hometown, Fort Wayne, Indiana, it was probably the slowest week of my life. Not in a bad way, but just I was so used to. I'd been on the road for 5 months, and I was so used to waking up every morning and having just like an epic journey ahead of me. That when it was all said and done, and I was back at my parents' places, the days just seemed a lot longer. So that's been big. I got a lot of transitions and a lot of things coming up post run. So yeah, it's been a big transition.
So when you finished in California, how long did you stay in California before you went back to Indiana?
Yeah, so I finished on December 13th, and the next day I had an interview, in-studio interview with Recovery Today magazine in Ventura. And then after that interview, we went and we picked up the RV and we started driving back. And it took us, 4 days to drive back from California to Indianapolis, because we had to drop the RV off in Indianapolis. So, we didn't stay in California at all. We left the next day. We actually ended up reconnecting with people that we had met during the run and talking to them again. And we're working on a documentary. So we interviewed some people that we had met along the way that we didn't have an opportunity to sit down and interview. But yeah, it was a quick drive back. It took us, I think it took us 4 days to get back. We took a break in Denver, because that's where Mike lives, and then kept going.
So can you quickly explain, when you say we and then you talk about Mike, if you can kind of explain who Mike is and what his role was?
So Mike is my cousin. We grew up down the street. Our moms are sisters. And he's like the producer of Crisscross the Nation. He's been working hard behind the scenes, talking to sponsors, and he did, all the video and, worked on the website and social media and all that stuff. And so when we drove back, it was Mike, my cousin, and then my wife, who I recently got married. She was my fiance at the time, but she surprised me in California. I didn't think that she was gonna be able to make it. And so it was us three. We drove back together.
Well, congratulations. When did you get married?
I got married January 3rd.
Of 2018?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Oh. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow.
Okay, so you mentioned the documentary. I'm really interested to hear about that. Were you filming just most of the entire 5 months that you were out on the road, or was it just just various sporadic times, or how did the filming work for that?
Yeah. So Mike was with me most of the way, and he filmed. Yeah, he filmed 4 out of the 5 months pretty much. So we've got footage from across the country. And while I was running across the country, in the places where we would stop, we would look up information about like treatment facilities in the area. And there were times where I'd take a break from the route and we'd go to a treatment facility and talk to people about drug and alcohol addiction and also about recovery. And so Mike captured B-roll from the entire country, and, footage of me running along the route, interviews, like just random interactions that we had during the journey, footage in the RV, at campsites and stuff like that. So he ended up capturing a lot of footage, and he's also a photographer. So he's taken just some amazing photos of the run. So we've got, a great collection of photos and video, and really, really impressive stuff.
Yeah, so probably you've got a ton of footage. What is your end goal with this documentary? Like how long of a documentary are you looking to put together? And then, what sort of media are you going to use to get that out to people?
So we're shooting for like a 60-minute documentary. Our first goal is to go back to the communities that I ran through and present the documentary to them and see if we can create some like grassroots events where we have a screening of the documentary and we encourage folks from those communities to come out and watch the documentary, and team up with the treatment facility in that community and see if we can get some specialists to, before or after screening the documentary, to talk to folks in the community about addiction and about recovery. And because the whole objective is to take the footage that we have, take the information that we've gotten from these interviews and really change the stigma around addiction and tell a different side of the story, tell a story, of the silver lining. So the story of recovery. And I started telling a lot of journalists that interviewed me that my run really what it was, at the root of it, it was a run to celebrate recovery and to encourage folks who are struggling to get treatment. So, and I think, the first thing to do in encouraging people to get treatment is to try to reduce that stigma and reduce shame and let people know it's okay if you're struggling. It's okay to ask for help.
Well, I'm sure that documentary will be a really powerful message. I know that there's a lot of people that I run with through my run group that they've struggled with substance abuse in the past, and not only is the exercise something that helps them, but also that group setting where there's that support with others. And so I think the documentary is going to be absolutely powerful, and then anything we can do to help you with that on spreading the word and helping with distributing it with links or our Facebook, our website, we'll certainly be more than happy to help you out with that.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So did you find as you were meeting up with people and going to these that people were pretty receptive of you and open? Yeah.
So that's a really interesting aspect of the story is, so you have, the disease of addiction, it's this big secret, or it's a big elephant in the room in a lot of cases, right? Nobody really wants to talk about it. And I think as a result, anybody who's struggling with it, and not only the person that's struggling with the addiction, but also the family members, they feel extremely isolated. And so that's the experience that I had prior to the run. And then actually doing it and traveling across the country and telling people what I was running for, what was surprising is that people opened up. Despite the fact that Mike and I were complete strangers, people would open up to us, and as if they were just waiting for somebody to talk to about it. And so, a lot of people were receptive. And the thing is, every town that we went to addiction was an issue. So it's not just isolated to pockets or to certain demographics. It's everywhere. And we saw that firsthand going from coast to coast.
Wow, that's cool. And I know that at least 2 of our listeners made it out and had a chance to run with you. And there may have been more. I just happen to know of the 2. And it was really interesting because both of them had mentioned kind of what a real impact you had on them. How often, so besides visiting, but how often did you have the chance to run with other people while you were doing this?
I think I had 7 or 8 people come out and run with me. not including the end, because at the end, I had a decent crowd waiting for me at the beach. But yeah, around 7 or 8 people.
And what's that like when strangers show up to meet up with you and run with you?
I mean, it's awesome. It's really inspiring. It's reassuring that, reassured that what I was doing was a good thing. And there's one person that he ran with me, and he pitched his running idea to me. And, nobody had ever done that before, where they had, asked me for advice to start a project. And that was kind of cool. It was kind of cool to have somebody come to me for advice because they had seen, what Mike and I were doing. That was really inspiring.
Well,
And,
I think that's kind of neat. So besides the recovery piece and that portion of it, I mean, you're inspiring people to do other great things as well.
Yeah. One thing that I thought a lot about was how, I never thought that I could take, like, of all things, I never thought that I could take my running and use that in a way to like inspire people to live a better life, or inspire myself to live a better life, really. So that was cool. That was a really cool aspect. And I spoke to a group of students the other day, and one message that, well, Mike and I, we spoke to them, and one message that we had was that, you can take any skill that you have. It could be, something that's artistic, or maybe a subject in school like math or something like that. You can take any skill that you have and use it in an obscure way to inspire other people to be better versions of themselves, or, to live better lives.
That's great.
That's really awesome. I mean, a lot of people always think, if you want to inspire people, you got to have a way to get a message out there. But something as simple as running, you're inspiring people to go out there, to get the help they need, to make the changes in life that aren't going to just help them, but help the family, help the community. And, it doesn't have to be something huge like making a Oscar-winning movie, or, maybe donating billions of dollars to charity. It can be something as simple as just running.
And the beautiful thing about running, too, is you can make a statement without really saying anything. You're making a statement with your 2 feet.
When you met up with these people and you told them what you were doing and that you were running across the country, what kind of reactions did you get?
I think the most common reaction was that they couldn't run from here to the end of the parking lot. That was always that was the consistent comment from coast to coast. It was like, man, he's running across America? I can't even run to the end of the parking lot. It's pretty funny.
Well, speaking of our listeners, we actually had one listener who found out we were interviewing, and he kind of wanted to jump in on the interview, and he had a bunch of questions, and I think it might be a good place to start to kind of talk a little bit about the details of some of the run. The questions come from Andrew, and the first question out of the list he has, maybe we can split these up. The first question he had, would you do it again?
I wouldn't run across the United States again. But I would do something similar, maybe in another country.
Oh.
Yeah. So I live in Spain. I live in Madrid, and one thought is to run from the Mediterranean coast to the Atlantic. Seeing the country on your own feet is it's an unbelievable way to really get to know a location.
The next question he has is, how many times did you get lost?
How many times did I get lost? Well, oh man, of 150 days, not a lot. Well, I used my phone. I used Google Maps to kind of navigate, and there were a couple days in particular where I had to take trails. One day was I was running to Ash Fork, Arizona, from I think it was Williams, Arizona. From Williams, Arizona to Ash Fork, there's no really good way to get to the towns on foot because the only option is I-40. And so you have to take some back roads and some forest roads and stuff like that. And Google had me going on this funky route. And I'm not sure if I was on public property the whole time, But I got lost, and I ended up doing like circles in a field in the middle of Arizona, and I made my way out. But that was an interesting day. And the days on the trail days were extra hard because, you know, if anything happened, I didn't have any support because Mike, he wasn't capable of getting out to where I was. So like the day that I ran from Williams to Ash Fork, I was out on trails for like 25 miles or something like that. So, you know, I didn't see Mike at all that day. And it was up to me to make it to the next town. Or I would have been sleeping out in the woods.
Well, did you hit points where you didn't have a cell signal?
Yeah. Navajo Nation is one that comes to mind. In Navajo Nation, I'd been running through the reservation for a couple of days, and I didn't have much of a cell signal, but it was a clear route. Can't tell you the name of the road, but it was, I think it was maybe like US 160, something like that. But I was on that route for a couple of days, and I finally get to this small town called Kayenta in Kayenta, Arizona. And I'm running through town, and I see this billboard to my right, and it says Cellular One, the only cell phone coverage in the nation. And I was like, oh, that's why my Verizon doesn't work here.
Yeah. Oh.
Because there's only one cell phone company that covers this area.
So through that section, was Mike close to you at least then?
So what we would do is we'd divide up the mileage into segments of like 8 to 12 miles. And so we'd have meeting points at each, 8 to 12 miles. And there I'd eat a turkey sandwich or drink a little water or something like that, or just sit down and take a break. We would plan those meetings or those points out before I'd leave for the day. And so when I didn't have cell phone coverage, sometimes we couldn't communicate. I carried a walkie-talkie too, which covered. It was like had a 2-mile range. So if I was within 2 miles from him, I could talk to him on the walkie-talkie. And also I had a GPS spot tracker on my orange mud pack. And so he knew exactly where I was at all times because he could follow along on his cell phone just with the spot application. So I had 2 GPS trackers. I got a Garmin Forerunner 230. And so I mapped out all of my runs with my Garmin, and I uploaded all of that to Strava. So you can go to the website, and I have every single run from, where I started at Liberty State Park to Venice Beach, on my Crisscross the Nation Strava account. That's
really cool. And what is your website?
So I have 2 domain names, crisscrossthenation.com and then ccthenation.com.
Great. And we'll put links to all of that in the show notes as well, so people can check that out.
Okay. And then I do have the questions here. Another question from Andrew, and he's asking what the high point is, and then I'm not going to allow you to use the finish, because obviously that's the right. Easy answer. But during your 5 months on the road, what would you consider was, your highest point whenever either something inspired you, or, an amazing sunrise, or, whatever. What was your high point?
There's 2 ways I can answer this. So one would be when I finally felt like I had reached the desert. It was a gradual transition. The last town that I went through before I fully felt like I was in desert was Cortez, Colorado. Uh-huh. It's really interesting because I passed Mesa Verde and it was still green and somewhat mountainous, and then I went through Cortez, and then after that gradually just became more and more evident that I was in the desert. Yeah. And I think that was near like Ute Mountain. So the reason why that was so significant was the day that I finally felt like we had reached the desert was the day that I got to Four Corners. And so the landscape had changed like drastically within a couple of days. And when I reached the desert, the reason why that was so significant was because I knew that I was in the final stage of the run, or at least at that point, I felt like I was in the final stage of the run, because I knew that from there on out, it was just desert. I'd gotten through I'd gotten through like the heartland and the Rockies. And so I was on to that final part. Several highlights scattered throughout the run would just be those moments where I was running along and I would meet somebody. Somebody would randomly appear on the route, and I'd end up talking to them, and I'd make a connection with them, that like just a really powerful connection with them, talking about the journey and talking about the cause. And it was always the moment right after those interactions. It was just magical. It was, it's pretty amazing to meet a stranger in a strange place and connect with them for 5 minutes and then move on and know that you'll probably never see them again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So we've talked about the high point. I'm sure that at some point, during the trip, there was probably a low point. Maybe something where it's like, I don't want to continue on anymore, or, things were just really tough. Was there a low point somewhere that was significant to you?
Not really. I was totally in my element. I wish that I could have a job that was like that, because I was totally out there on the road, running every day, being by myself and thinking about things and looking at the scenery and talking to people from time to time. Like, that was perfect. I think that's like, it's just like the perfect setting for me. So I never had that moment where I wanted to quit. I always felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt comfortable out there.
Did you ever have any injuries or anything while you were out there?
Yeah. So, I increased my mileage in Kansas and I had some 40-mile days and some higher, like 30, like 35, 38-mile days. And when I started to increase my mileage to that extent, like, I noticed a little tendonitis in my left knee. I got some pretty nasty shin splints when I left Sterling, Kansas. I was on these sand paths, like these sand roads. Can't remember the name. It was a wildlife spot right just west of Sterling, Kansas. I started to, and that was a 40-mile day. Started to get shin splints. It was a dull pain, so it didn't, like, I could run through it, but I ended up taking a break, actually. So if you look at my Strava, I think it's like the first week of October, I ended up taking a break. I took 7 days off, just, rested up and iced my shins. So I got shin splints then, but that was about it. I didn't really have any major injuries. No stress fractures. So I haven't run for about 2 weeks. I still have a little bit of tendonitis in my left knee. And so I've talked to some doctors about it, and they think it's going to go away. But they told me just to rest up for a little while, take a break from running.
So how many pairs of shoes did you go through?
I went through 10, but the 9th and the 10th pair are still good. I've got like 160 miles on each pair. So I'll be using those for a while.
What's your favorite shoe?
I like the Clifton 4s, the Hoka Clifton. Actually, I like the Clifton 3s better than the Clifton 4s. And I heard that Hoka just came out with a shoe that's just like the Clifton 3, but it's a different name. I can't remember the name. I think it's like the Nepali or something like that. So I really like the Hoka Clifton 3s. The 4s are cool. They're good. I ran in those as well. And then I like the Brooks Ghost 10. I think those are just good shoes. I mainly used Hokas.
Great. Did you have a sponsor that was helping you out with some of the shoes?
Yeah, Running Warehouse.
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
In fact, we know for those that are also fans of the Negative Splits podcast, they have a discount code for there that we all tend to make use of. So
it's very helpful.
Yes, it is. So we have love for the Running Warehouse too.
So,
nice.
Chris, you had spent time in the Peace Corps. I'm wondering if your service in the Peace Corps helped you on this trip at all during your time out there.
Yeah, I think it helped me with the isolation and the idea of, just like the general sense of being a stranger, being an outcast. Outcast is kind of a strong word for it, but just not being from the area. So I hadn't lived in the United States for about 6 years before I came back and did this. So for me, like, this run was I was visiting the United States in a way. So that like added a different element to it, because I'd run through, towns in the Midwest that I was familiar with, and I don't know, I felt like it was like it's like I had hit a reset button, and I was kind of looking at them differently, which was really cool. But I think overall, the isolation, I got really used to being by myself, or at least, feeling isolated culturally in the Peace Corps. You're the only American in the town where you're living, and you're in that town for 2 years. And so there's definitely like cultural isolation. You're different. You just are, because you're from a different place. I think that experience living abroad really helped me to deal with being alone on the road. And also, like, I got used to going to towns in the Peace Corps, or going places, because I live in Spain now, and I'll visit small towns outside of Madrid and stuff like that. So through those experiences, I've gotten used to going into towns and talking to people, and just the idea of being a stranger in a different place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's an aspect that I probably wouldn't have thought of. I'm curious too, I know you were talking about when you were first starting out and stuff, I guess you were transporting your gear. You had a stroller, is that correct?
Yeah, a Thule baby jogger.
So did you use that for most of your journey?
So I was with Mike in New Jersey, and then on the fourth day, dropped me off in a small town. I want to say it's called Ashland, New Jersey. That was on day 4. Dropped me off to start the route that day. So back up. What we would do is where I stopped the day before, that's where I would start. So I didn't miss a step on the route. So he dropped me off at where I had stopped the day before, and with the baby jogger, because he had to go home. He had to go back to Denver. And I ended up pushing the baby jogger across the border into Pennsylvania, and I pushed it across the entire state of Pennsylvania. And then there were a few other times I ended up pushing the baby jogger from like western Indiana all the way to the Mississippi River in Illinois. So I pushed it across Illinois, and then in eastern Colorado. While I was pushing the baby jogger, so I carried all my gear there, running shoes, clothing, my tent, sleeping bag, all that stuff. I would stay at campsites, either campsites or Motel 6s.
Well, I've got and I want to hear about what your loadout is that was in your stroller that you was pushing along, and everything that you took with you. I've got a goal. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I want to do the entire length of the Katy Trail, which is a trail that's from St. Louis and then all the way across the entire state of Missouri. Yeah, I mean, I just think that would just be an amazing trip, and something that it's not quite as intense as running across the country, but still something that would be quite an accomplishment for someone. But I'd like to know, what all did you carry with you that got you through that journey in the stroller?
I ran on the Katy Trail. Can't remember where I started, but it ends in I think it's close to Clinton, Missouri.
Yes,
I was on it for a while. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
It is. I love it.
Yeah, it's really pretty. So I carried, I had 2 pairs of shoes, my sleeping bag, tent, ground pad. I bought a 5-gallon water jug that it's just a plastic container that actually folds down as the water leaves. So it's made I think it's designed for canoes, for fishermen. So I had that in the back. There's netting in the back of the jogger. So I had that in the back. So I'd fill that up and carry that. And then I had a couple, random water bottles here and there. Oh, solar panels. Those were key. So I put those on the front of the baby jogger, and I hooked them up to my cell phone, and I had my cell phone on the handle of the baby jogger. So I had Spotify and Google Maps up, so I could actually check Google Maps while I was running. and keep my phone charged the whole time. And then, for when the solar panels wouldn't work, like at night, I had an extra charge, a Mophie, to keep my cell phone charged. Let's see, what else? Bicycle lights. I had a couple of those on the jogger, and bungee cords. Bungee cords definitely come in handy because you can strap stuff like on the top. Or I use bungee cords to put the solar panels on the front of the jogger. But yeah, my Thule baby jogger was great. I was concerned about the axle. So like there were a couple spots, specifically like in Pennsylvania, I went on some trails where I thought, man, like, I don't know, I was crossing my fingers that the axles wouldn't break, but it held up. Yeah, the tires were really good. Didn't have any spokes break. When I was in eastern Colorado, I was running through Pueblo, and all my tires were flat because there was just glass everywhere. And I ended up staying at it was a Super 8. And the next day I was changing my tires in the hallway of the hotel. And I ended up talking to one of the employees there, and she told me about slime. It's like a special tube that has slime inside of it. And so if you get any kind of small hole, it patches itself. So I bought some of those. That helped out a lot. I didn't have any flats after that.
I know that Sean and Scott from Sword, they helped you out a little bit. What sort of role did they play on helping you out with this?
The run was sponsored by Sword. That's what I drank from coast to coast. Really good stuff. And so yeah, that's what I was. That's what I was hydrating with the whole time. And it's good stuff. I mean, it really worked out. I never got cramped up or anything like that. And so they were supplying me with that. They gave me like the energy pills, like the caffeine pills. And I would take those sometimes in the morning. Those are great. And then also, they gave me the big bags of Sword that I would mix with my water in the morning. Sometimes I'd pour it into I had a 70-liter endurance pack from Orange Mud, and sometimes I'd put the Sword in there as well.
What's your favorite flavor?
I mix the berry and orange. So how you're supposed to do one scoop with every 20?
Yeah, I think that's 20 ounces.
So I do what's up?
Yeah, so 1 scoop to 20 ounces I think is standard, and then you can kind of play from there. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, 20 ounces. So I'd split it. I do like half a scoop of orange and half a scoop of berry.
That sounds good. I've heard recently about people like mixing the flavors. Somebody said that, I guess in the bike community, mixing the half orange and half of the ginger is supposed to be really good, which I haven't tried yet. So
that sounds great.
Yeah. I think that'd be really good.
I always feel like we end up doing like the Sword cooking show every time because like everyone has like a different concoction they make from it.
I bet you could make Sword brownies if you tried hard enough.
That's like the one Sword thing that I don't think that would appeal to me.
Just you wait.
I think berry brownies would be good. Sword berry brownies.
Sure.
Chocolate berry. It'd be really good.
Yeah, we really do need to write a Sword cookbook. We can, cooking tips and everything. And then, at the end of it, have like mixed drinks that you can make out of it too. And so, I think we should do that.
I think you're onto something.
All right. So we've talked about Sword. We've talked about running Warehouse. Was there any other companies or any other individuals that helped you out along the way?
Yeah. So we had 6 sponsors, Sword, Running Warehouse, Orange Mud. They gave us a ton of gear. And then Parkview Health System. They're a major hospital system in northern Indiana. So they were one of our sponsors. And then Hoosier RV, they were a sponsor of ours, and they helped us with the RV. And Summit City Chevrolet, they were also another sponsor.
So that's really great. That it sounds like there's a lot of generosity of companies and individuals helping you out with this. Are you ever considering doing something like this again?
Oh yeah. Well, not.
I mean, we talked about Europe, but doing something with this many sponsors, with and maybe something a little bit bigger in terms of another documentary or getting more companies involved.
At the moment, Mike and I we're specifically just focusing on the documentary and making sure we make that the best we can. I'm sure we'll have more ideas to come. Just at this moment right now, I haven't come up with the next adventure yet. Talking about the sponsors, we had a ton of private donations as well. We had an Indiegogo page, and as the run progressed, and as the project got bigger and bigger, just amazing, like the support that we got from our community. From text messages to emails to phone calls to donations to the Indiegogo page. I think that was another amazing aspect of the project was when I came up with the idea to do this. I didn't think that it would be as big as it became, because originally the idea that I had was me alone on the road pushing the baby jogger and doing a solo run across the country. And then, as planning progressed and all that, it just ended up being much bigger. And another thing that's been really amazing is I've had people from the past, from my community that I hadn't talked to since high school, reach out to me. It's just so cool reconnecting with those people, and the thought that maybe we wouldn't have reconnected had I not done this project. So,
okay. Well, one thing I'd like to ask you, and I want some advice from you, and this is mainly just for probably our listeners and whoever. I mean, you never know who's going to be inspired to do something amazing out there. There might be someone who's listening to this podcast and going, boy, I've had this idea in my head forever, and I just want to try something. But, they've maybe not knowing how to get started, or not knowing, or just, making that decision that I'm going to do something amazing, just like running across the country. So I guess we can break this up into, first, when you came up with this idea, and let's say someone else has an idea of doing something big and amazing, what do you have to do and tell yourself to give yourself the courage to go ahead and make the leap and just say, I'm going to do this? I mean, what's your advice to that person there that's making that choice?
As soon as you make it public, as soon as you start letting people know, letting friends and family and acquaintances know, you're going to have positive feedback and negative feedback. And, for starters, if you're bound and determined to turn the dream into a reality, you have to make sure and disregard the discouragement. So just seek out the people that are enthusiastic about the project and understand the reasons behind why you want to do it. Don't be afraid to ask for help, or I couldn't have done this alone. The reason why this thing even came about was because I had support from a lot of people. You might not be able to complete every single aspect of the project. For example, my cousin is great. He's been working in advertising for nearly a decade. And so he understands, how to create a campaign. And, he's a great photographer and a great videographer or filmmaker. And so reaching out to him, I did it totally on a whim. It ended up, I had no idea that he would be interested in working on this project with me. And, the day that I wrote him the email, he called me 3 minutes later after sending it to him. That made every difference. And, that was one of the big reasons why this thing became a reality, is because I had his support, and then, the support from family and from the community as well. So it's just inevitable that you will get naysayers, and then you'll get people that back you. And if you really believe in your idea, and if you really believe in the project, just focus on that positive energy and follow through with it, and make sure and work with people that are willing to turn your dream into a reality.
That's great.
All right,
I think that's a great philosophy for life in general.
Yeah, it's true.
I like that. So as you look back, preparing for your journey and you were getting ready for the unknown, looking back, what do you feel like you really did right? And then also on the flip side, if you had the opportunity to go back and change something, what would you have changed?
I think the route and timing was really good. I wish I would have, logistically, I wish that I would have looked at, I wish I would have studied campsites across the country a little bit more closely. Because I felt like when I was alone in Pennsylvania, I had the whole route mapped out, but there were some cases where I felt like I was scrambling to find a good spot to sleep. So I wish I would have, looked at that a little bit, but the route, I think I did a really good job with the route. We had one snow day, that was probably partially because of luck in a sense, but also, weather was pretty good for us. I think it doesn't really have to do with the running aspect of it, but more like the campaign aspect of it is before I started the run, before I came back to the United States, really, my first interview for Crisscross the Nation was with you guys. And it was amazing. So right before we did this interview, my dad's upstairs in the kitchen, and I told him before the interview, I was like, I don't feel nervous this time. I feel much more comfortable talking with them. But the first time that I talked to you guys, I was so nervous.
Oh,
I could barely even talk about my own project.
Well, you know what? If it makes you feel better, it was my very second episode ever, and I was probably more nervous than you.
And I think looking back, I wish I would have prepared a little bit more for my interviews and for any kind of public speaking situation. I think had I prepped a little bit more, or I was just thinking any interaction that I had on the road, I should have jotted down the story right after it happened, so that when I had interviews with, for example, I had interviews with Recovery Today, the magazine. I had 5 interviews with them across the country, and I think every evening had I taken some time to write down what had happened that day, then when those interviews came up, I would have had pages and pages of things to talk to them about. And I think when I was in the midst of the run, I was so focused on miles and calories and getting from where I was to the next destination, that when I had those interviews on the road, I had a really hard time. Telling them what interactions I'd had and what people I'd met, because my brain was just in a lot of different places. It was mainly focused on making sure that I didn't get injured and making sure that I kept on moving forward. But I think had I been a little bit more disciplined with, journaling down the experiences that I had, rather than just relying on, the footage that we captured with the camera, that I would have done a better job at more of the campaign aspect of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's good advice for anybody who's, thinking of doing something similar. But that's also, at the same time, that's got to be hard, because I imagine at the end of the day, you've got to just be fried and exhausted. It was running that distance. In order for it to be feasible, I divided it up 8 to 12 miles segments, and it would take me, it was like a full-time job kind of, because it would take me 6 or 7 hours a day, and not of running the whole time, but, with the 8 to 12 mile segments, and then the little breaks in between, that was a 7-hour day right there. And I was doing it 6 or 7 times a week. And in the evenings I was pretty exhausted, but still looking back, I feel like I could have done a little bit more. So in regards to writing down stuff and planning things for the interviews. I think we always kind of feel that way. We're always hardest on ourselves and look back and feel like, oh, I could have done this, or I could have done that. But I don't know. I think you've done some absolutely amazing stuff.
Thank you.
So if somebody else gets this crazy idea that they want to run across the country, what advice would you give them? Besides, don't do it.
No, I'm an advocate for transcontinental runs for sure. Think about weather and timing and your route. I would definitely base your route on what time of year that you plan on doing it. Because so for me, I started in Liberty State Park in July, and I knew that it would gradually get colder and colder and colder. So I knew that I would have to at some point start working southwest to avoid the winter. And it just so worked out that I made it through the Rockies before the weather got, really cold. Think about that. The route is kind of like that's like the foundation. Once you get the route mapped out and you have a really good idea as to, what towns to be going through and elevation and all that stuff and the roads, then from there you can mold the rest of the project or the rest of the run around that. So the route is monumental. Definitely track the mileage on your shoes. I think one of the reasons why I didn't have any major injuries was because I was really good about that. I stopped using my shoes after, between 320 and 350 miles. Eat enough calories. I was eating definitely consume enough calories. I was consuming about 6,000 calories a day. I didn't lose too much weight. I was a little bit skinnier by the end, but.
And where were you finding your food along the way? Especially when you got into some of the remote areas and maybe some of the times when Mike wasn't with you.
Yeah. So, in Pennsylvania, I didn't see a supermarket for I don't know, 10, I felt like it was for 10 days or something like that. And, I got a lot of food from truck stops. I ate a ton of beef jerky. If I'd find nuts, like pistachios, I'd eat a lot of pistachios because I'd heard from a school teacher that I worked with in Madrid. She said pistachios, they help with inflammation. So I ate a lot and I like pistachios. And they're fattening too, really good fat source. So I ate a lot of pistachios and protein from the beef jerky, V8 juice. I ate a ton of V8 juice because you can get 2 servings of veggies in a bottle of V8 juice, and peanut butter. If I could get a loaf of bread there, I'd get that. I drank a lot of whole milk at the right time. I wouldn't drink a bunch of whole milk and then go for a run.
I was just picturing that. Oh, on a hot summer day.
Yeah. Yeah. I could, I got used to drinking. I could drink a gallon of whole milk in an evening.
Oh.
And it's a good fat source.
Your body just adjusts.
That's insane.
Was there anything really funky that you ate? Anything bizarre that you had along the way?
Not really. No, I got sick of Cliff Bars. I ate a ton of Cliff Bars, and by the end of it, I couldn't eat any more. I did have, so one bizarre moment was there were a couple of times I got to a campsite, this is in Pennsylvania, got to a campsite, totally exhausted, no way of getting into the nearest town, but the town was only a couple miles away. So I ordered a pizza. And there's one time in particular where I was talking to Mike on FaceTime, and I'm like, "Hey man, hold on a second. My pizza's here." I was right outside of my tent. He's like, "For what?" Yeah, the pizza delivery guy. He came to drop off the Domino's pizza. So I had pizzas delivered to my tent a couple of times because that was I didn't have any food in my baby jogger, and that's what I could get delivered to me.
I love how Domino's could never find my dorm building, but they can find a tent on the side of the road.
That might have been something personal.
This is at a KOA, so
were there any times?
Official.
Yeah, well, there you go. Were there any times you didn't make it to a campground? Was there any times you had to sleep? Any place that was a little uncomfortable or a little sketchy?
No, I never stealth camped. That's what I thought initially when I started thinking about doing the transcontinental run, I thought that I would. I thought that's what I'd end up having to do. I'm not. Did you guys follow Paul Wheeler? He was a British guy that ran. He ran from the West Coast to the East Coast. He started on June 1st, but he spent like most of his nights were spent stealth camping, and he actually got caught by the police one time in a public park. So fortunately I never had to do that. There were a couple times, and this was interesting. Like there were a couple times where I had to, I hate to talk badly about him, but like there are a couple times where I had to stay in like some dive motels.
Yeah.
And because there was no campsite in the area. And it was just kind of a bummer because like I'd go into my room and I'd think, man, if only I could just set up my tent and sleep in my tent. Cause I'd prefer that over the room.
Than touching anything in the room. No, you know what? We have had other like ultra runners on who have done, some of the journey walks and have done some of that kind of stuff. And they've talked about some of the, motels that they've had to stay in, and it's a concern when they ask you, you're staying the whole night. Yeah. So we've heard this story before. Don't blame me.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, you're taking a little bit of time off right now, kind of getting recovered from your trip. What's next for you once you get all recovered and ready to go? Do you have anything on your mind for your next big plan?
The Berlin Marathon was on my radar, but I can't sign up for that. So I'm kind of shopping around for a good fall marathon. I want to go sub 3. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to do that next fall in Porto, Portugal. Is I think that marathon, the Porto Marathon, is November 4th or November 18th or something like that. So I'm thinking about running that next fall. So I'll probably start training for that. But yeah, that's the next goal is to go sub 3 in the marathon.
And I've got one last question for you. The documentary. And do you have any sort of time frame on when that's going to be out?
Yeah. So the plan is to release it on July 17th, that was the start of the run last year. So we'd like to, release it a year later. So, we got about a 6-month window to edit and put it together.
We'll be keeping an eye out for it.
Cool. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, guys, that was Chris Miller. Thank you for coming on again. It's always wonderful to talk to you, and such a amazing accomplishment running across the country. If you want to find more of him, his website is www.ccthenation.com. And you said it's also crisscrossthenation.com? Is that the other domain? All right.
Yep, crisscrossthenation.com.
All right. You can also find him on Facebook and Instagram at crisscrossthenation or #CChrisRun. And he's also on Strava, believe it or not. I know that's just a small app. Not a lot of people use it, but, he's a fan of it. Shout out to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils for the use of their music. Visit heartlandrunning.com for the show notes, for all those goodie links. If you don't want to type them in yourself, I get it. It's a lot of work. And be sure to join that Facebook group for all the exclusive Facebook group content. Once again, I'm Chandler.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Crystal.
And thank you for listening.